In this video, we explore the most haunted and chilling doll stories in the UK. Real stories that will make you question every porcelain face you've ever seen. From dolls that cry at night to ones that whisper your name when no one else is around. These aren't just tales, they're real experiences. So turn off the lights and get ready. These dolls aren't here to play. If you love real scary stories that keep you up at night, hit that subscribe button because these haunted tales are just the beginning. Don't miss what's coming next. They only get darker from here. Story number 1. Janet the Haunted Doll. Mansfield, Nottinghamshire. Janet the Haunted Doll was discovered in a quiet town called Mansfield in Nottinghamshire, England. She wasn't found in a dark attic or an abandoned house like you might expect. Instead, she was purchased from a second-hand shop by a woman named Claire in 2015. Claire had a love for old Victorian items, and Janet caught her eye because of her antique dress and sad-looking glass eyes. She bought the doll and placed it on a chair in her living room, not thinking much of it. But from the first night, strange things began to happen. Claire reported that the air in her living room felt heavier, colder than usual. At first she blamed it on an old drafty house, but then she started to hear whispers, soft and breathy like a child talking to someone. She lived alone and didn't have pets, and the whispers were always faint, usually heard late at night. One night while watching TV, Claire noticed the doll's head had turned ever so slightly toward her. She thought it was just her imagination, but when she looked away and looked back again, the head had moved further. That was the first time she felt truly afraid of Janet. In the weeks that followed, Claire's friends and family began noticing strange things too. One friend who came to visit for tea refused to come back after seeing Janet's eyes blink. Another guest swore the doll's arm moved slightly when no one was looking. One of Claire's nieces said the doll whispered her name when they were left alone in the room. Claire didn't want to believe it at first, but she began to record videos. In one video, you could clearly see Janet's eyes shift ever so slightly from left to right, even though no one had touched her. Claire began to research the doll's background and contacted the shop she bought it from. The owner said the doll had been left outside the shop's door in a sealed box with a note that read, "Do not open. She is not safe." The shop owner assumed it was a prank, but Claire realized there was something much darker going on. She contacted a local paranormal investigation team, who set up cameras and equipment in her home. During their visit, the temperature in the room where Janet sat dropped by almost 10 degrees, and the investigators' batteries died one by one. Their audio recordings captured faint crying and one clear sentence, "Help me." They believed Janet might be haunted by the spirit of a girl who had died long ago, possibly trapped in the doll. Claire, no longer feeling safe, agreed to give the doll to a private collector who specializes in haunted items. Since leaving her home, Claire reports that all the strange activity stopped, but the new owner of Janet claims the doll still moves, and guests often refuse to be near her. Many people who have seen Janet in person say there is something truly wrong about her. She looks like just another porcelain doll, dressed in old-fashioned clothes with cracks around her eyes. But once you're in the same room with her, you feel it. A presence, a sadness, a warning. Janet is now kept in a locked display case, but even then, visitors have reported hearing soft whispers when they walk by. Story number 2. Grace the Victorian Doll. Grace the Victorian Doll is one of the most talked about haunted dolls in the United Kingdom. She is kept at the Haunted Antiques Paranormal Research Centre in Hinckley, Leicestershire. The museum is known for collecting strange and haunted objects from around the country, and Grace is one of their most active items. She looks like a normal antique doll at first, wearing a faded Victorian dress and with big glassy eyes, but people say there is something very wrong about her the moment you stand near her. The doll was brought to the museum by a family who claimed it had caused many problems in their home. The mother said that the doll used to belong to her grandmother and had been passed down through the generations. But after moving it into their modern home, strange things began to happen. Lights would flicker. Doors would open and close by themselves. One of their children became afraid to sleep in her room, saying that the doll was watching her and sometimes breathing. The family didn't want to throw the doll away, fearing that it might make things worse, so they gave it to the museum instead. From the first day Grace arrived at the research center, staff noticed strange energy around her. People reported feeling cold and uneasy when standing too close. Some even said they felt dizzy or sick, as if something was draining their energy. Investigators placed her in a rocking chair, and over time they captured video evidence of the chair rocking on its own. Sometimes the rocking was slow, almost gentle. Other times it was fast and sudden, like something was angry. During one investigation, a team used EMF detectors and spirit boxes to try and communicate with whatever was attached to Grace. They heard a soft female voice say the words, "I'm sorry," and then, "Don't look." It gave them chills. They believed the spirit inside Grace might be that of a young girl who died long ago, possibly from sickness or an accident, and somehow became trapped in the doll. Some even think the doll was used in a ritual a long time ago, which opened a doorway for spirits. There have also been reports of people fainting or becoming emotional when near Grace. One woman started crying uncontrollably for no reason. Another visitor said she felt like someone was whispering in her ear even though no one else was in the room. Because of these incidents, the museum staff placed warning signs around Grace's chair and now ask visitors not to touch or stare at her for too long. Grace is now one of the most famous haunted items in the museum. Paranormal investigators from all over the UK come just to see her. Some believe she is sad and wants peace, while others think she is angry and doesn't want to be disturbed. Either way, most people agree on one thing: there is something truly unsettling about this doll. Even in a room full of haunted objects, Grace stands out. Her presence is cold, her silence feels heavy, and sometimes, when the room is very still, you might hear the gentle creak of her rocking chair, even when no one is near. Story number 3. Mandy the Doll. Mandy the Doll is one of the most well-known haunted dolls, and although the most famous, Mandy, is in Canada, there is another version of Mandy's story told in Scotland. This lesser-known doll is said to be just as creepy and dangerous. The doll was found in the early 2000s in an old cottage in the Scottish Highlands. The house had been empty for many years, and when new owners started cleaning it out, they found a small dusty trunk sealed with old rope. Inside was the doll Mandy, wrapped in a thin cloth that had strange symbols drawn on it. Mandy had a cracked porcelain face, faded clothing, and glass eyes that seemed to stare right through you. The couple who found her thought she looked unusual but didn't believe in ghosts, so they brought her home and placed her on a shelf in their living room. That same night, they both woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway, even though no one else lived in the house. When they got up to check, they found nothing except that Mandy was no longer on the shelf. They found her later, sitting at the top of the stairs, facing their bedroom. Over the next few weeks, strange things kept happening. The couple would often hear knocking sounds on the walls, sometimes even soft crying coming from the room where Mandy was kept. Their lights would flicker, and they noticed cold spots in the house that never went away. The woman started having terrible dreams of a little girl crying in a dark room. She believed it was connected to Mandy. They even tried locking Mandy inside a wooden box, but somehow, the box would be open the next morning. One day, a family friend visited the house and brought along a dog. As soon as the dog saw Mandy, it started growling and barking, then ran out of the room shaking. That was the moment the couple realized something was seriously wrong. They did some research and found that dolls like Mandy were sometimes used in old spiritual rituals in the past. Some people believed that spirits of children who died suddenly could be trapped inside dolls, especially if the dolls were near them when they passed. The couple decided to hand Mandy over to a local historian, who also studied paranormal objects. He placed the doll in a glass case and tried to examine her, but he soon began having trouble sleeping and said he constantly felt like someone was watching him. Visitors to his small museum often complained of headaches, and some said they heard whispering when no one else was around. Mandy is now kept in a private collection in Scotland. People who see her in person say there's something strange about her eyes. They seem to follow you no matter where you move, even though she doesn't move around anymore. Many believe her spirit is still active. No one knows who the spirit inside her really is, but those who have been near her all say the same thing: Mandy is not just a doll. She is something else entirely. Story number 4. Sinister Sally. Sinister Sally is a haunted doll that gained attention in Liverpool, England. Her name came from the strange things that happened after she was bought at a local charity shop by a woman named Helen in 2017. Helen was drawn to the doll because of its old-fashioned dress and curly hair. Sally had a soft cloth body and plastic arms and legs. She looked like a typical child's doll from the 1970s. There was nothing obviously creepy about her, until she was brought home. Helen placed Sally on a shelf in her bedroom with her other vintage dolls. But within just a few days, Helen started waking up in the middle of the night for no reason. She would hear soft tapping sounds or what sounded like small footsteps running across the floor. Once, she found Sally had moved from her shelf to the floor, sitting upright and facing the bed. Helen thought maybe her cat had knocked the doll down, but when it happened again the next night, she began to feel afraid. Helen told a friend about it, and they suggested putting up a camera in the room. When Helen did, the footage shocked her. Around 3:12 a.m. the video showed Sally's head turning slowly to the left, then back to the right. No one else was in the room, and the window was closed. Helen began to believe something was inside the doll. She called her Sinister Sally as a joke at first, but the name stuck, especially after more strange things happened. Lights in Helen's house began flickering randomly. Doors would open on their own. One night, Helen's smoke alarm went off without any smoke or fire. When she checked, Sally had fallen from the shelf again and was sitting near the hallway. Helen started having terrible dreams of a little girl with dark eyes standing at the foot of her bed. The girl never spoke but just stared with a sad and angry face. Helen became convinced the girl's spirit was connected to Sally. She decided to reach out to a paranormal team from a nearby city. The investigators brought special tools to test for energy changes. While filming, their equipment started malfunctioning. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly, and one of the team members said he felt something grab his wrist. Later, when they played back their recordings, they heard a child's voice whispering, "I'm still here." After that, they believed Sally was haunted by a lonely or possibly angry spirit. Helen didn't want to destroy the doll, fearing it could make things worse. So, she gave Sinister Sally to a paranormal museum that agreed to keep her in a sealed glass case. Since then, museum staff have reported strange activity around Sally's display. Visitors often complain of headaches, chills, or an overwhelming sense of sadness near the doll. To this day, no one knows where Sally originally came from or who the spirit inside might be. But one thing is clear: this doll, though small and harmless in appearance, carries a presence that is deeply unsettling. Sinister Sally continues to sit silently, watched by cameras, and still manages to frighten those who dare to get too close. Story number 5. Harold's UK Twin. Harold's UK Twin is a haunted doll that was discovered in a small town near Leeds, England. Many people have heard of the original Harold the doll from the United States, known for his terrifying history and paranormal behavior. But few know that a nearly identical doll was found in the UK, and it seems to share the same disturbing energy. That's why people started calling it Harold's UK Twin. The doll was found in 2019 by a man named Tom who worked in house clearances. He found it in the attic of an old house that had been empty for years. The doll looked very old. Its face was cracked and dirty, with one glass eye missing. Its clothes were torn and smelled of dampness. Tom thought it was creepy but interesting, so he brought it home and placed it in his garage, along with other antiques he had collected. That night, he heard banging sounds coming from the garage. He thought maybe something had fallen over, but when he checked in the morning, everything was in place except the doll. It had moved from one shelf to another. He lived alone, so there was no one else who could have touched it. In the following days, Tom began having strange dreams. He saw flashes of a young boy locked in a dark room, crying and calling out for help. Sometimes he would wake up and find deep scratch marks on his arms and legs. He thought it might be from his dog, but the dog refused to go anywhere near the garage anymore. The scratching continued, and the dreams became more intense. He started to believe the doll was behind everything. Tom told his friend Sarah about the doll. She came over to see it for herself. When she walked into the garage, she felt dizzy and lightheaded. She said it felt like something was watching her. Sarah had a strong interest in the paranormal and suggested they try to record the doll overnight. They set up a small camera and left the garage locked. When they watched the footage the next day, they were shocked. Around 2:43 a.m., the doll's head turned slightly. Then a shadow passed across the camera, even though no one was there. They decided to call in a paranormal investigation team. The team used EVP electronic voice phenomena recorders and captured a few chilling words. One whisper said, "Trapped." Another said, "He hurt me." They believed the spirit of a child or someone who had suffered greatly might be attached to the doll. The team advised Tom to either have the doll blessed or give it to a collector who could contain its energy. Tom was too frightened to keep it. He gave Harold's UK Twin to a private paranormal collector based in York, who now keeps the doll locked inside a glass cabinet. Visitors report feeling sick, cold, or suddenly anxious when near it. Some have said they heard faint crying, even though the room was empty. To this day, the doll remains a mystery. No one knows how it ended up in that attic or whose spirit is inside it. But everyone who has been near Harold's UK Twin agrees it is not just a toy, it is something far more disturbing. Story number 6. The Witch's Familiar. The Witch's Familiar is the name given to a strange and creepy doll found in a rural village near Dartmoor, England. The area is already known for its old legends about witches and spirits, and this doll only added to those dark stories. It was discovered in 2008 by a couple named Alice and Ben who had moved into a 300-year-old cottage. While exploring the dusty basement, they found a small wooden box hidden behind some bricks. Inside the box was a handmade doll stitched together from cloth and animal fur, with buttons for eyes and tiny bones tied around its neck with string. The doll didn't look like a regular toy. It seemed old and worn but carefully crafted. On the bottom of the box there were strange carving symbols that Alice couldn't understand. She later showed them to a local historian, who told her the carvings matched markings once used in old witchcraft rituals. He explained that some witches long ago created familiars, objects or animals believed to carry magical spirits to do their bidding. Alice and Ben didn't believe in such things, so they placed the doll on their fireplace mantle as a strange decoration. But soon strange things began to happen. Every night they heard scratching sounds coming from the walls and ceiling. At first they thought it was mice, but nothing was ever found. Their cat refused to go near the room with the doll, and they often woke up to find the doll had moved slightly, just enough to notice, like a hand raised or the head turned. One night, Alice saw the doll lying on the floor, even though no one had touched it. Ben became more uneasy. He started feeling cold drafts in the house, even with all the windows shut. He claimed he saw shadows moving across the walls at night, and once, he thought he saw a small figure rush past the hallway, even though no one else was there. Alice began to have nightmares of being chased through a forest by a woman with black eyes and tangled hair. She felt the doll was connected to those dreams. They contacted a local priest, who visited the home and immediately felt something was wrong. He blessed the cottage and tried to remove the doll, but when he picked it up he felt a sharp pain in his hand. A red scratch appeared even though there was nothing sharp on the doll. The priest told them the doll could be a familiar something that once belonged to a witch and carried her spirit or her power. Fearing things would get worse, Alice and Ben handed the doll over to a small folklore museum in Devon. The doll is now kept in a glass case with protective charms around it. Visitors are warned not to touch or tap on the glass. Even now, some say they feel cold or uneasy when they walk by it. Others have reported hearing faint whispers in the room when they are alone. Many believe the witch's familiar still holds dark energy from the past, whether it's a cursed object or truly linked to a witch's spirit. No one can deny the strange events that followed its discovery. Story number 7. The Crying Doll of Liverpool. The Crying Doll of Liverpool is one of the most disturbing haunted dolls ever reported in the UK. The story began in 2014 when a young mother named Lauren moved into a small flat in Liverpool with her daughter, Emily. Lauren didn't have much money, so most of her furniture and decorations came from charity shops. One day, she found an old porcelain doll in a nearby store. It had a pale face, curly hair, and wore a faded blue dress. The thing that made it stand out was the small line of painted tears under its eyes. Lauren thought it looked sad but beautiful, so she bought it for just £2 and placed it on a shelf in Emily's room. At first, nothing strange happened, but after a few nights, Lauren started to notice that Emily wasn't sleeping well. She would wake up crying and pointing at the doll. At first, Lauren thought it was just normal toddler nightmares, but Emily's fear grew worse. She would scream if the doll was in the same room and kept saying things like, "She cries at night, and she watches me." Lauren didn't understand what her daughter meant until she started hearing sounds herself late at night. Lauren heard soft sobbing coming from Emily's room. When she checked, her daughter was asleep, but the doll was always sitting upright, facing the door, even though Lauren was sure she had turned it the other way. One night, the crying got louder. It was high-pitched and filled with sadness, like a young child in pain. Lauren looked around the room but found no explanation for the noise. The doll's face looked slightly different that night, like the painted tears had smeared just a little. Lauren decided to remove the doll from Emily's room and put it in a box in the closet, but the crying didn't stop. Some nights it got even louder. Then other strange things began to happen in the flat. Lights flickered, doors opened and closed by themselves, and cold spots appeared in random places. A neighbor even asked if everything was okay after hearing a baby crying through the walls. Even though Emily had been at her grandmother's house that night, desperate for answers, Lauren contacted a local paranormal group. They visited the flat and examined the doll. One of the investigators, a woman named Rachel, claimed she felt overwhelming sadness as soon as she touched it. They set up audio equipment overnight and recorded several minutes of faint crying and a whisper that said, "Don't leave me." They believed the doll was haunted by the spirit of a child who had died in great sorrow, possibly someone who had once owned the doll. Lauren no longer wanted the doll anywhere near her daughter. She gave it to the paranormal team, who sealed it in a locked display box at their private archive. Even now, visitors to the team's office claim to hear soft crying when they walk past a doll's case. No one knows where the Crying Doll of Liverpool originally came from, but everyone agrees it brought a deep sadness with it, a sadness that could be felt, and sometimes still heard. Story number 8. Emily the Glass-Eyed Doll. Emily, the glass-eyed doll, was found in a small village near Bath, England in 2007. She was discovered by an elderly man named George who had recently inherited his sister's old cottage after her passing. The house had been left untouched for many years. While cleaning out the attic, George came across a wooden trunk filled with old clothes, photographs, and at the very bottom an old porcelain doll with shiny glass eyes. The doll wore a dark green velvet dress, and her long brown hair was tied with a faded ribbon. George didn't think much of it and placed the doll on a shelf in the hallway. From the first night, things began to feel strange. George, who had always been a heavy sleeper, found himself waking up at exactly 3:15 a.m. every morning. He would hear creaking sounds like footsteps followed by a soft tapping on the wall. He checked the house each time but found nothing. At first he thought it was just the old house settling or perhaps his nerves. But then he started to notice that the doll was never in the same position. Sometimes her head would be slightly tilted or her hand would be resting differently. What made Emily truly disturbing was her eyes. Her glass eyes seemed too real to human. George often caught himself glancing at the doll only to feel like it was watching him. One day he brought his granddaughter to visit. She pointed at the doll and said, "That girl's eyes are following me." George laughed it off at the time, but deep down he felt the same. It was as if the doll was aware of everything around her. George later found an old diary in the attic that had belonged to his late sister. In it, she mentioned the doll by name Lee. She wrote that the doll had belonged to her childhood friend, who had died in a drowning accident when they were young. According to the diary, Emily was given to George's sister by the girl's grieving mother, who claimed her daughter's spirit might still be close to it. His sister described having dreams of her friend calling out from the water and once even hearing a voice through the doll. She had hidden the doll in the attic many years ago after it began to scare her. George began to feel more disturbed. He would sometimes hear soft whispers when he passed the hallway, and he noticed cold spots near the shelf. One night, he woke up to find the doll placed at the foot of his bed, even though he had locked it away in a drawer earlier that day. That was the moment he decided to get rid of it. He contacted a local historian who had an interest in haunted objects. The historian took the doll and placed it in a controlled room with cameras. Over time, footage showed the doll moving very slightly and the room's temperature dropping at certain hours. Several visitors reported feeling uneasy or watched while standing near Emily. Now kept behind glass. Emily, the glass-eyed doll, is still believed to be haunted. Some believe the spirit of the drowned girl still clings to her. Her eyes, full of sorrow, seem to hold a silent story that no one wants to hear out loud.